So there's this tweet by this guy named Sid that goes as follows. The reason young men flock to alt-right MRA movements is because the left gives brain-dead advice to young men. We need to be more compassionate to them for our own sake.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad tweet, although not for the reasons that he's saying, rather because young men aren't flocking to join alt-right movements. And alt-right movements and the MRA have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. And that, dating advice isn't really going to be an important part of recruiting people into the left wing. How about just, actually addressing the issues that men have as a disadvantaged group?
Good. It's good to be compassionate to men, and if the left can do a better job of that, then that's great. That said, I have some problems with this tweet, like a weird amount of problems with this tweet, and I just wanted to talk you through them because I find it really interesting.
It is interesting how people from fundamentally different positions can both have problems with the same thing. I suppose it's probably just a pretty stupid tweet, really.
The first is, I'm not sure exactly what advice the left is giving to young men that is brain dead. Like, what are people saying?
I don't think there is any, really. Not unless you count feminism as being left-wing, and then, then it's all teach men not to rape and fight the patriarchy and blame it all on toxic masculinity.
Two, maybe this is the obvious one. This tweet here doesn't really account for other extremely important factors at play here, right? For example, what of patriarchy?
Called it. Yeah, but the whole patriarchy thing is really just victim blaming. People who don't want to deal with men's problems want to just pretend that it's all somehow ephemerally the fault of men in general.
We've lived in a very, very sexist society for a very long time. Feminism is a recent phenomenon.
Putting relatively recent there to try and obscure the fact that it's actually been a pretty dominant political movement since before his parents were even born. Maybe even his grandparents.
And so I think it makes sense that people are still attracted to the patriarchy as an idea. Are young men flocking to conservative movements because of some deficiency in leftist advice?
No, because young men aren't flocking to right-wing movements at all. Young people of both sexes are overwhelmingly left-wing, and especially on economic issues. Although it is true that most young men do think that feminism in particular has gone too far. So I suppose if you see that as being the whole of the left wing, then that's going to be a bit of a problem.
Or does it come down more to the fact that they were born in conservative households, told to believe conservative things growing up? Who are Andrew Tate's major fans, and who are their parents?
One of the big flaws in this whole idea is that it's all a very new phenomenon. The working class men were traditionally the heart and soul of every left-wing movement, and the most reliably left-wing voting bloc, right up until left-wing parties started doing id poll instead of economics. Something of a problem for all the people who think, it's just like the patriarchy, it's just men have been for so long in this dominant position, how could they not be patriarchal? As for Andrew Tate, really who cares? Yeah, he's had a load of followers on TikTok, and I'm sure Big Joel thinks TikTok's a bigger deal, but it's not exactly real, it's not the sort of thing that you get from real politics, for example.
Who did their parents vote for in the last election? People do believe in an ideology.
I wonder who Joel's parents voted for in the last election, because he seems to think that people just sort of hatch out of eggs and adopt whatever policies their parents believe in. That's really not true, and age differences in political beliefs are a very real and pretty consistent phenomenon.
That calls for suppressing others, suppressing women in particular, and
Ah yes, women in particular. Just ignore the education statistics and the crime statistics and the healthcare statistics and just ignore all of the numbers and facts and then pretend that women are the most oppressed of all groups. But this extremely cynical position makes me wonder, who does Joel want to suppress? Does he believe that there are feminists who want to depress and suppress people other than themselves, or is he only cynical about men?
So that's something we should think about here. Also, what of material factors, right? The cost of living going up and COVID-19 and political disarray.
Okay, now we're talking about real issues. real material issues like men being more likely to be homeless, being less likely to have their own home, not just to not be homeless but to own a home, being more likely to still live with their parents, being more likely to be unemployed, having lower rates of educational attainment, real limits, real narrowing of the horizons of men's lives. These are some real challenges, real economic hardcore challenges for men as a demographic group. But something tells me that's not what Joel's talking about.
Big Joel, what advice do you give to young men? This is what I'd say. You think exercising is good. Maybe you think you should pick up a skill. Maybe you think you should leave the house more.
You know, there's often this perception in men's rights circles that left-wingers, and especially, in this case, little Joel, people who normally go in big for systemic analysis and looking at actual structural problems, as soon as it comes to men's issues, have nothing to say but bootstraps. And here's little Joel with the single most useless, single most cliched piece of advice that any man could ever get. Go to the gym, bro. And that's it. Then Joel goes on a tangent about self-help, which is more attention than men's rights normally get from left-wing creators like him, although he has done some very questionable videos on the subject in the past, which I'll look at in more detail later.